When it comes to movie licensed games, they usually get a bad rap. But what happens when you have a game that's based on a movie, but the movie is also based on a game? It doesn't happen all that often, and when it does, it puts an interesting predicament on the whole situation of licensed video games. In this case, we have the new Ratchet Clank, which is based on the new Ratchet Clank film, which is a reimagining and retelling of the original Ratchet Clank back from the PlayStation 2. However, does this reimagining and licensed game worth your time, or should it just be blown to smithereens? The new Ratchet & Clank is not a remake. It is basically a retelling of the original Ratchet & Clank story. For example, in the original game, you played through the actual act, but in this game, you're actually reliving the story as told by one of the main characters, Quark. Longtime fans of the series will not be disappointed. The game does a great job of still encapsulating all of what makes the Ratchet & Clank series a lot of fun. Not only is its colorful worlds and great characters, but there is a ton of different weaponry, different enemies, and things to blow up. For those unfamiliar with the Ratchet & Clank universe, this is a perfect jumping point to get into the whole series. The game is a retelling and has a lot of the same settings and characters and keeps most of the original story intact. You're still playing as Ratchet & Clank, Ratchet the Lombax, who is a mechanic on a planet and slowly gets pulled into this galactic war that's going on, led by the evil Drek, who is creating an army of sentry robots, and as well as a planet-destroying device that is slowly destroying the universe planet by planet. Don't worry though, for fans of the original game, all the storyline elements are still intact, but I don't want to get into too many of the spoilers. The gameplay still retains that action, gun-toting, and platforming aspects that you've come to know and love from the core Ratchet & Clank series. Getting to visit the planets, a lot of which were from the original Ratchet & Clank, but getting to see them in a brand new light with some new areas and just seeing them in the new graphical styling. Some of these places are absolutely gorgeous. The game's chaos, once you get into battle, can not only sometimes be a little bit overwhelming, it's just an unbelievable feast for the eyes of just seeing how many pieces and particles and explosions that are going on after each and every one of these encounters. If you played through the early PlayStation 4 launch title Knack and saw what they were able to do with kind of the particles and just all the little things that were going around, Ratchet & Clank does that and does it even better. There is so much going on screen at one time, and the game does not slow down. While the game is relatively straightforward and linear as you're traveling from planet to planet, each planet has its own objectives and optional objectives for you to get either bonus items or bonus collectibles, as well as running into a few characters that the main plot doesn't necessarily make you go and visit. You can pull up the map at any time so you can kind of get your bearings, and it does a good job of making sure that you know where you're supposed to be going next, though there's a couple of occasions where you need to look around for a jump spot or something you may have missed so that you can continue moving forward. One of the big drawing points for me, and I'm sure many of you, has always been the weaponry that the Ratchet & Clank universe has, and this game is no exception. It doesn't just use the guns that were in the original Ratchet & Clank. In fact, it uses a lot of guns that were later seen in farther entries into the Ratchet & Clank series. You're going to have some returning favorites like the Warmonger or Mr. Zircon, and the sometimes broken Groovatron makes its return. However, there are a few new weapons that are thrown into the mix, like the Pixelizer, which does exactly what you think it does. It turns your enemies into pixels with every one of your blasts. In fact, when it comes to the weapons, it can actually be a little bit overwhelming. There are so many weapons that you end up getting. Basically, every time you make it to a new planet, there's going to be a new weapon for you to buy. Now, thankfully, the game does a good job of giving you enough bolts. As long as you're destroying all the enemies and breaking various crates along each of the areas you're exploring, you should have enough crates by the time you make it to the next planet in order to buy that next weapon. But once you do so, you're going to have to not only upgrade it, you're going to have to worry about ammo for it, and by the time you get later in the game, some of the newer weapons may not be quite as powerful as you would expect them to be because you may have leveled up other guns. So it's all a balancing act of, do you really want to focus on a few guns and level them all the way up, or try to slowly level up all of your arsenal? Like I've already mentioned a little bit before, the graphics are beautiful in this game. A few locations in particular really stand out. There's a couple of planets with forest, jungle, and then ocean-like settings, and this game is just absolutely gorgeous. And the amount of chaos that is able to go on screen in this game does not slow down one bit. In fact, can be overwhelming with how many exact enemies can be on screen at one time, and just how many little things are blowing up and laying on the ground all at one given time. This game is really well made, and I only ran into a few minor small glitches here and there. A couple of weird falls I ended up having, or a couple of times where there was some clipping, but since the game really didn't have any slowdown, and the load times are actually really good. One thing that I absolutely cannot stand in any game is once you end up dying and going back to a previous checkpoint, and it would take forever for that checkpoint to end up loading back up. But in this game, the load time between a death and reloading back to that checkpoint is almost instantaneously. When it comes to the sound department, the soundtrack is quite nice. If you're familiar with a lot of the other Ratchet and Clank games, it's a very familiar feel. There's a very orchestral feel to a lot of the game's music, and some of the really epic battle tracks can really kind of get you into the battle. There's also some great voice acting here with all the characters. One of the things that also makes Ratchet and Clank so fun is all of its colorful characters, and they're all extremely well voice acted. I'm not sure if every voice from the film takes its role here in this game, but I think a lot of them end up doing so, and all the characters are well acted, well animated, and overall fun. Difficulty-wise, there were a few moments where I had a couple of cheap deaths and was a bit overwhelmed by just the mass amount of enemies that were taking me on, but there are 3 difficulties for you to choose from. You can switch at any time, and once you complete the game one time on any difficulty, you unlock the challenge mode, which is basically a new game plus. You retain all the weapons and upgrades that you gather, but the game is much more difficult. It's been a very long time since I actually sat down and played the original Ratchet and Clank back on the PS2, but all of the memories and all the fun I had back when I played that game the first time through came back to me during the course of playing this brand new game here on the PlayStation 4. Being a licensed movie game technically should not make gamers stray away from it, and the price tag of only $39.99 instead of the normal $59.99 is definitely a little bit more enticing for what you're getting here with a movie licensed game and technically a remake. If you're a longtime fan of the Ratchet and Clank series, or you've always been interested in the series but never decided what game to finally check out, this is your opportunity to kind of run into the series, and I think long-term fans are definitely going to enjoy it. But in the end, guys, I'm going to be giving Ratchet and Clank for the PlayStation 4 an 8 out of 10. And that's going to wrap up this review. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.